Welcome back to Gruber Motor Company. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner, and welcome to the Gruber Tesla Roadster podcast.
So, the first thing we wanted to show you is the image that's behind us there. It's tough getting a beautiful roadster like that into a rainforest, so we had to rely on artificial intelligence to help us with that. And it's amazing what AI can actually conjure. If you look very closely on these AI generated images, there are some mistakes at times, and AI isn't that intelligent yet. Whereas an author that we interviewed last week said it'll hallucinate at times.
Yes.
But what I wanted to show you is a second image where I became more specific. What I wanted was a Tesla Roadster inside a sea container to stay with the theme that we're going to cover today, which is the barn find roadsters that are coming out of sea containers. And if we can throw up that image, my request to AI was, give me a red roadster inside a sea container, and this is what it generated.
Well, that's a red Roadster, and it's inside of a sea container.
It's almost inside, yeah. But how I was able to stitch that and graft that to the car is remarkable. Those of you that work with Photoshop, you know how difficult it is to align things to make it look that well. But the other part of it is it really doesn't look like a Tesla Roadster, other than it's got two wheels and a wedge front end. The lights are a bit different. But anyway, that's the issue with AI. Sometimes you get a winner.
I have a little bit of a story on that one. I used to work for a large payroll processing company and human resource company, and they outsourced their programming team to India.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would give the Indian people instructions on the types of programs that needed to be done and changed. I led a team of business analysts. And the way that they would interpret our instructions was sometimes befuddling, sometimes was just flat out humorous, because we would say things, like put a roadster in a sea container, and they would come up with the programming equivalent of what AI did there.
Okay, yeah, right.
And we would scratch our heads and think, how exactly did you do that? And they simply were taking very literally the types of things that we said. We just weren't being clear enough in our communications.
Yeah.
Over time, they grew and they became a wonderful resource for us. But that picture reminds me of the challenges working cross-culturally and the language barrier that you have when you're dealing with something that just doesn't totally get what you're trying to do.
I think that's a very appropriate term with humans using AI, the cross-cultural differences.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it looks like we've got a YouTube comment from XP Reflex 626, and he says, first,
you are the first comment for today. Welcome to the show. Thanks for watching us.
So I've got a Roadster item for you, and this one had to do with a customer that posted on a Facebook site. And that's not uncommon. When a customer isn't getting the results from a vendor, they oftentimes will vent, and forums, online forums are a great place to do that. It helps you get it off your chest and all that. Well, this particular scenario was a Tesla Roadster that was bricked in 2015 actually. And it was actually purchased off of our Roadster matchmaking site, because we sell both functioning Roadsters and brick Roadsters. Well, it took a few years to get this car to a Tesla service center for the battery replacement, probably because they weren't making them until 2019 or 2020 again.
Right.
And he finally got his slot in Tesla for this battery pack replacement. And then things went downhill. There were delays. There were technical issues. And the final version on this was, and this was the lesson, if you buy a brick Roadster and you don't have full disclosure precisely what happened, under what conditions it bricked, the best scenario is somebody forgot to charge it. It was neglected because they were on vacation and too much time went by and it never came to a shop like ours to have the battery recovered. In that scenario, a replacement battery pack will just fire the car back up and it'll run just fine.
Right.
But if that Tesla Roadster got bricked because there was a technical problem, and oftentimes there is, the PEM has a problem, it can't charge. The issue then becomes after the battery gets replaced by Tesla, it's going to need repairs. And it could be lengthy repairs. And that's what happened in this case. There were problems in the car that needed to be resolved after the battery replacement. And of course, from a customer's viewpoint, it's, well, I paid you guys 30 grand for this battery. I expect it to be functioning and running in a short period of time. And why am I getting charged for all this extra stuff?
Right.
So, but anyway, we offer to help, and we often collaborate with the Tesla service centers. It's one of the things I'm very proud of, is that we were able to bridge that gap between competitors versus partnership. And oftentimes we'll get log files from the service centers. We'll give them our take on what we think is going on under the hood. We share our tech tips, and there's a lot of interchange and exchange of information to help the customers get their cars fixed and get these things back on the road. So speaking to Tesla about this car, they confirmed that the car had been bricked since 2015, and there were problems in the PEM at that time. There also was a problem with the AC compressor, which had to be repaired. So there were deferred maintenance items with this car, and they were going through all of those, resolving those. There was even a board in the PEM that was difficult for them to source, and eventually got found and put in the car. So the point that I want to leave everybody with is, in general, Tesla does a pretty good job with Roadsters, considering that there are very few people left within Tesla that know how to work on them. And it's no fault of theirs. There's attrition. There's a lack of volume. Back in the day, Roadsters were the only thing they repaired, and it was easy for on-the-job training to take place. The other thing that I got out of this collaboration with Tesla was some updates for you, and these are important, I feel. Let's see, let me go through this here. Tesla, okay. They told me that they have beefed up their Roadster training programs. They are even now sending technicians back to corporate for Roadster training.
Amazing.
They have also begun to take the parts cars to the next level, which is they are realizing that the disassembly of these cars at the service centers are a great learning tool for the technicians. When you take things apart, you pretty much learn how it's put together, so they are now beginning to, rather than just leave the cars outside or wherever they're storing them and use parts as needed, they're beginning to disassemble these cars and put stuff on the shelves and create inventory. Again, a strong commitment to the whole Roadster project. Now, staying with that topic for just a moment, there was a picture posted on one of the Facebook sites from a service center, and there were a bunch of Roadsters sitting out behind the service center. And the conjecture was that these are parts cars, and isn't it sad that these cars are, sitting outside and that they're no longer able to run, and that, even some accusations, well, Tesla bought them and parted them out. But there was a comment that was made by one of the people in this thread, and I want to read that to you because I think it really encapsulates what's really going on with these parts cars. And bear with me for a minute here.
While you find that comment, first, I think it's really admirable that Tesla has taken the time to begin to show some love to the Tesla Roadster owners. It seems like, 4, 5, 6 years ago when some of these issues were occurring, that Tesla it felt like they had abandoned the people. And it felt like they really didn't care that much because they're so busy being a big corporation making 5,000 cars a week at the time. selling Model 3, selling Model Y, selling Model S's that they simply didn't know any better, I guess. They felt like the Roadster community just wasn't that important anymore.
Hmm.
And now the actions speak so much louder than words. Bringing additional new technicians in to take apart these Roadsters so they can be trained on servicing them out in the field. Consolidating, actually, to me, is a sign of commitment.
It is.
Because when you don't have Roadster to work on more than maybe once a year, you're going to forget what you did a year ago
Right.
and have to learn it all over again. By consolidating, now you have a consistent flow of cars come in. You have the ability to train your techs. You have the ability to keep that knowledge current, and that helps the community. And I feel like we're all on the same team here. And it's helpful and good for us to be able to collaborate with Tesla, and we're thankful that they collaborate with us as much as they do now too.
Sure. And, by regionalizing service centers now, of course, there's an inconvenience. I had one customer say, I used to drive 15 miles to my closest service center. Now it's got to go 200 miles because they don't have any technicians at my local service center.
Right.
Well, that's still better than sending it cross country to a company like us, which sometimes is the
Yes.
correct method of fixing these. But so the point I always try to make is we come from the critical power world. And, that's a mature business. It's been around much longer than Tesla. They also make equipment just like these EVs, except they're not bright blue, 4 wheels. They're inverters with battery systems in computer rooms and data centers.
That's right.
And in that world, when the technology gets too old and the equipment gets too old and they have newer models, after 7 years or so, they simply tell the customers, in a year, your service is going to end. Parts are no longer will not be available anymore. And if you want to continue to have uninterruptible power, here are your upgrade options. Tesla could have done that with the Tesla Roadster. It's very difficult for them to maintain these cars.
It is, and it's such a small run car that they're not under the NHTSA mandates to have parts for these cars for 20 years
Right.
beyond the last manufacture date, like automakers have to have for the larger run cars.
Yeah, and we're talking about 15 years since the Roadster began to be released. And some of these are 15 years old. So let me read you what one of the comments was regarding the complaining about the parts cars. And so he says, this thing about parts when they were buying them or they were buying parts cars. This was back in 2019 and 2021 when Roadster support was on hold and parts were scarce. They took trade-ins at market value, which is why a lot of owners agreed. They were basically saying, if you want a Model 3, we'll take your Roadster in for trade.
Mm-hmm.
These cars are still being used today as donors to supply parts to our existing Roadsters, so that's the silver lining. And I think his comment encapsulates it perfectly.
Right.
A couple of years ago or so, there were parts Roadsters that were sitting outside service centers. And granted, if you have a leather seat and the top's off the car and it gets rained on or snowed on, that leather's going to be ruined. But they didn't buy these cars for the seats,
Right.
for the leather seats. They bought them for a whole bunch of other parts that were vital, that were out of production. And seats, you can always get them reupholstered, and if it was a used Roadster, the seats probably weren't in great condition to start with, right?
Well, exactly.
So anyway, these pictures began to circulate about these cars, and there was some grief and heartache. And then there was some talk from Tesla about too many of them at the service centers, and they were going to send them to the crusher. I got involved at that point, and I got to the right people within Tesla and said, look, guys, 2 things. These Tesla Roadsters are going to be collectible someday. Mm-hmm. Of course, that's proven to be very much the case. And these frames that you have are custom. They're never going to be made again, these car chassis, basically. So rather than send these to the crusher, we need to preserve these. If you don't have a place to do that, I offered our compound here.
Right.
We've got 85 open rack spaces outside, and they can certainly sit outside. They're frames, this is metal, aluminum, and steel. And anyway, we got them to reconsider, and they are now storing the ones that aren't at service centers in, I think it was Sunnyvale is where
Okay.
they shipped some of them to.
Okay.
So again, we averted that disaster. Now, one of the pictures, and if we can throw this up here, guys, it's called VIN 501. And as someone pointed out, when you see a Tesla parts roadster sitting behind a service center and it's got everything ripped off it, or the majority of things ripped off it, it is not a joyful experience. This happens to be VIN number 501, which is the first 2.0 Roadster ever made. It was in our service center, and the customer was moving to Hawaii. He ended up needing to sell the car. We didn't have our Roadster matchmaking site up and running
Okay,
yet. Couldn't
okay.
find a buyer quickly enough, and he was considering selling it to Tesla. At that time, I think they had already provided full disclosure as to what they were going to do with the cars. For a while, we couldn't tell people because we're under NDA.
Right.
And eventually that got, we were able to tell people. Well, he ended up selling it to Tesla anyway, and I always wondered what happened to VIN 501. It was a collectible car, in my opinion, because, the 1.5 series ended. It was the first 2.0.
Correct.
And but anyway, it's sitting right now in Long Beach. It is still being used as a parts car. And again, it's not a happy experience if you really appreciate Roadsters to see them sitting out in the weather like this. The other thing I want to say about those pictures that were posted on Facebook, there were about 7 Roadster pictures that were posted. Not all of them were parts cars. One of them, I recognized the VIN, and I said, this is one of our customers' cars. It was there for a battery replacement for one of those anemic battery conditions.
Okay.
So I contacted the customer right away, and I said, did you change your mind and sell it to them for parts? He says, no, not at all. It's just sitting there waiting for the battery pack at this point. So again, the lesson there is if you see a Roadster outside a service center and it's intact, it doesn't mean it's a parts car necessarily. It might mean that it's just being stored outside because they don't have room inside for the car.
Sure, but you would hope as a Roadster owner that they would try to get those inside rather than outside when possible.
Yes, as we've pointed out dozens of times, Roadsters are not weatherproof. Don't leave them out in the rain.
Yes.
When you do, it may work for a while, but the water gets into the charge port door and it begins to corrode and eat up that circuit board that's behind it. You can get it waterproofed, and it's one of the things we have on our website, by the way. Anybody that comes from a rainy climate, we recommend waterproofing that charge port door if they leave it outside. Looks like we got a bunch of questions, Mark.
Yes, we do. Pablo Damon on YouTube, we start with, and he says, you should be proud. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's fun supporting the Tesla Roadster. There are very few of them. As I tell people that I take on tours all the time, every one of these cars seems to have a story. It's not your average Chevy and Ford where, it's just a single owner car. Oftentimes these cars have interesting background stories, history. They're fun.
And when you first were getting into Gerber Motors, I'm the chief financial officer of the Gerber companies overall. And I think one of our conversations was, this is a market of 2,500 cars, and we know there's never going to be any more made. How are we going to make this happen? Because it's 2,500 people. To my surprise and delight, this has been a constant market of enthusiastic and committed owners who really want to see these cars move forward. And it's easy for me to tell people that, people ask, how's Pete doing? Where's he at? How are things going? I'm like, well, Pete kind of, I would call it retired because I don't see him a lot in the other businesses. But he works. He's doing his passion. He's doing what he loves. I don't think he's ever going to leave the company, or especially leave Gerber Motors, because you really are. You're in the best of all worlds working on your passion projects.
It's fun. And, it's a collaboration. I'd like to take credit, but there are a number of people in the community that are contributing to the Roadster cause. A lot of innovators, Mark Webb Johnson, for example, with his
sure.
OVMS box.
Yeah.
Henry Sharp with the CAN Junior and CAN Senior. And Tesla, let's not leave them out. The fact that they're still making that Roadster battery pack, and I guarantee you guys, it's under cost. They're not making money on it.
Oh, yeah.
You do the cell cost, put it to a spreadsheet like we've done a number of times, because we'd love to be able to help them making those packs. we can't reach those price points. We can't scale it like they did.
No, nothing even close. So, William F. shared our live stream on TikTok. Thank you, William. And Caliban on TikTok has also followed us. So thank you as well. On YouTube, Pablo Damon asks, how many Roadsters exist?
You know, the best barometer we have is our website, Gerber Motors. There's a census program that we have been requesting owners send us information for. And currently, there are just over 2,000 of them that have reported as still being around out of 2412. So that's not bad.
Right, right. And then Des has just come in with a question on TikTok as well. Why doesn't Tesla have to play by other manufacturers' rules for parts life expectancy? I can help answer that particular one. There is a minimum quantity of automobiles that have to be manufactured first before those rules for life expectancy go into play. I may ask Richard or Aaron to see if they can look up what exactly that number is. But I believe it is significantly higher than 2,500 vehicles in total.
Yeah.
That's why Tesla is not playing by the rules, as it were. If you look at the Model 3 and the Model S and the Model Y, you're going to find that they are playing by those rules because they have manufactured so many more of those cars.
Sure. And, you know, in that world, even if the manufacturer doesn't continue to provide parts for large production runs like that, or they go out of business.
Yeah.
If there are sufficient population of vehicles out there, aftermarket takes over because it's lucrative, because there's ROI. That's the problem with the Tesla Roadster.
Yep.
None of us are able to assimilate the high startup costs to recreate electronics and some of these custom parts in the car. Now, we find ways to get it done, like 3D printing like we do, you know. Oftentimes reviving vendors. There are even there are other companies that are going to vendors and having replacement parts made, you know, like suspension parts.
Yes.
But it's always a beg, borrow, and steal type effort. In fact, if you talk to the early Tesla people, the early Tesla supply chain people, they had the same problem. They could not attract the A-grade vendors because they would go to them and say, we need 2,400 of these made. And they'd say, well, that's, you know, that the MOQ is much higher than that. Or they give them a price, when you amortize that cost across 2,400, it's unrealistic. It just can't be put into that bill of materials.
Well, they might get an MOQ of, 10,000 per year for 5 years or something like that. And So the real Papa Stew on TikTok has said, you guys are amazing. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. YouTube, Pablo. Oh, we already did that. How many
we've got one more I want to get to, but I think we have a couple articles we want to get to first.
All right. We should probably tell, is it Arium JH 1138? We're going to get to you, so hang tight, because that topic that you raised is going to be part of this presentation today. So if you guys want to throw up a quick picture, I've got a tech tip for the Roadster owners. And since this is a Roadster podcast, we want to make sure that we infuse it with, we put some of those tips into the recipe.
Which one? What's the name again?
It is the Lug Nut torque setting. Yeah, the Lug Nuts. First of all, it's 77 foot-pounds for the Lug Nuts on a Tesla Roadster. And here it shows you the order of tightening these. Found that in one of the old Roadster manuals. And again, our advice here is they all had that locking lug nut. Get rid of it as fast as you can. Replace your old rusty lug nuts with new zinc-plated ones. They're on our e-store, or find your own on eBay or wherever. And retire that locking lug nut, because when it breaks, not if, but when, it's going to be the most inopportune time when you've got a flat tire and they have no way to get the wheel off.
You know, that picture and those foot-pounds, I've learned a little bit, mainly from relatives in the past, about dealing with cars and doing my own tire changes and stuff. And they always say, when you have 5 lug nuts, you make a star. And you always, and if you can, they talk about, hand tighten it and then go.
I didn't realize that. I just looked at that, and he's right. It's a star pattern.
Yeah, it's a star pattern, and this is the same thing. And when you tighten by hand, go to where it's hand tight, and then go somewhere about an eighth of a turn beyond that, and you'll get to around the right torque. Or if you have a torque wrench, do that, and typically you're going to go, depending on the car, between 70 and 100 foot-pounds of torque. So when I saw this, I'm like, oh yeah, this is just like any other car at this point.
Makes sense. Yeah. So also in this owner's manual, and this one had me rolling on the floor. Can we bring up a picture that's called Roadster Soft Top Warning? And I don't know whether this warning was created because somebody actually did this, but this is talking about the soft top on the Roadster. And what they're saying here is, warning, never attempt to install the roof while the vehicle is moving. This could cause an accident in which you and others may be seriously injured or killed. And I picture somebody on the freeway at 80 miles an hour attempting to take off their soft top while they're driving. Has this ever happened? So what's the reason for this message in that manual?
Somewhere at some point in time, somebody tried to either
Yep.
put on or take off. Maybe it's their old Trans Am T-top that they were driving down the freeway and decided that, oh, it's nice outside, but I don't want to stop. Who knows? But the lawyers get hold of this stuff, and that I'm sure that the lawyers got hold of this and say, oh, you have to put warnings in.
And that warning is in the book for permanently at this point. All right. So let's get back to Arium JH 1138. He says, 3 Roadsters were found in China with 0 miles. I hope they reach out to you. Well, Arium, they did reach out to us, and we're the ones that actually began to broadcast that these Roadsters are available because the current owner, came to us and asked us to sell them for him on our Roadster matchmaking site. And what I'm going to report to you today is that the results of this sale were unprecedented in terms of the type of visibility that we generated for these cars.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think we first posted this early this week. And so far, let me read you some of these things. We sent out 2,600 press releases in addition to advertising this on some of our social media sites and our pre-qualified Roadster buyers, which generally gives us pretty good play for anything that gets sold. So we went to 2,600 press releases as well, thinking that this may be of interest to the magazines that like to scoop things like this. And the angle was barn finds. Those of you that are car guys, car people, barn finds are always exciting. Somebody opens a old shed or a building, and they realize there's a 1982 Lamborghini Countach underneath a tarp that's been sitting there. It might have rodents in it. It might have some rust. It might have, of course, it's going to need a paint job.
Oh, yeah.
But the fact that this was found is just always remarkable to car people. It occurred to us that these 3 Roadsters that are buried in these 3 sea containers in China at a dock somewhere is really the first EV barn find.
Yes.
So that was the angle, and our suspicion played out. So far, the magazines that have picked up the article are Insider Business, Haggerty. Electric Viking is going to do a podcast with us tomorrow, or an interview, and Kim Java is going to do one with me Friday morning.
Okay.
And then you guys counted a bunch more magazines. What are they?
Well, I've counted 9 so far. We've got Perth.com News in Australia, Carscoops.com, Motor One in the UK, Inside EVs, of course, Auto Evolution, Car Experts in Australia. MSN has republished the Inside EVs article. So if MSN will typically curate a lot of different news sources, and then they'll republish stuff on their front page. I've seen it on my MSN feed. Auto Spies Auto News, which is a European one. And then Fuel Car Magazine, which is a Spanish publication. They've actually have a Spanish published article so far.
Amazing. And the one that I'm also proud of is you all know Supercar Blondie, I hope. She is all over my Facebook feed these days. Every single day, she's in some exotic car. I don't know how many of her there are. They must have cloned her because she's in Dubai one minute, then she's in Germany another, and then she's in Poland another, and UK. But every day I get a different video from her. She picked up this article as well. So thank you, Supercar Blondie. And by the way, one of these days you're going to need to come out here. Kim Java had also told us that she was going to do that at some point, come out to visit, as is Sandy Monroe. We have a unique operation here. We're a large EV shop, probably one of the first large commercial ones available, and it's quite a sight to see. So some more people that have commented on this. Elon Musk commented on Twitter, and suddenly we realized that by the following day there were, how many views was it, Jesse?
Our podcast from yesterday morning was just over 3,200, I think, views, and then the post was from a Twitter profile called Drive Tesla Canada, and their original post is what Elon replied to, which had about 2.5 million.
2.5 million. Post. Wow, we've never seen that much traffic ever.
No, not at all. And I'm looking at Elon's reply, and it actually was to Drive Tesla Canada and Gerber Motors. So he was replying directly to us as well.
So let's talk about these cars for a moment, because there's a lot of discussion. What should happen to these cars? Now, bear in mind, these were cars that were put into sea containers directly from Tesla in 2010. Brand new, never driven, never titled. They were shipped to China. They were abandoned by the buyer and sat there for 10 years. In December of 2020, they opened up one of them and realized there are cars sitting here, and they had been accruing storage charges for 10 years. The new owners relieved those storage charges and began to think about what they're going to do with these cars. They still have boxes in the trunk of what we believe to be the charge cable, sealed.
Right.
So this is going to be the first indication, at least in recent history, of a brand new legacy Tesla Roadster in a time capsule, basically how they did it, 13 years ago.
Well, and time capsule, that's such an apt and perfect word for it, because a lot of the articles that we've seen have taken on the terminology that we were using yesterday, that this is better than a barn find. In a barn find, like you said, you've got rodents, you've got dust, you've got, grandma has driven and drove the car for 3,000 miles and then put it away.
Yeah, farm animals.
Farm animals, whatever. These were in sealed containers, so there's no dust. There's no, there's been no UV radiation. There's been probably no degradation of the paint whatsoever because it's been preserved. One of the pictures of the red one shows that the packing foam, the styrofoam that they put on either side to help make sure that that the car didn't accidentally move and get up against the edge of the container, is still there right next to the car. But at the same time, we know from experience working on these Roadsters. Well, what about the PEM? What about the capacitors? Capacitors are usually good for only about 8 years or so.
There is deferred maintenance in these cars. What is intriguing to us is, and if they don't get sold in China, they're coming to Phoenix, Arizona, and we're going to do a technical review on these cars. What we're looking forward to is researching whether the service plug was pulled on these cars. It would seem to me that that would be something that Tesla would have done, recognizing that it's going to spend some time in transport without a charge, between shipping, customs, movement, all of that. And if they pull the service plug, is it possible that a Tesla Roadster could survive 13 years in a coma? We've never seen that. We've seen a year and 2 or 3 months or so and found that the battery was just fine as long as that service plug is pulled and nothing's draining the battery. So that's the first discovery that we're looking for, is are these packs any good? Will they be recoverable? And then we get into the broader issues, the deferred maintenance. Just because the cars weren't driven doesn't mean that they haven't aged and there's deferred and that there isn't any deferred maintenance. In an ICE engine, you have degradation, like rubber parts, for example. In these EVs, you have electronic components that are aging. Like you said, electrolytic caps. In the critical power world, we proactively replace those every 8 years. These cars are, 13 years now?
Right. So these caps might be dried out.
Mm-hmm.
I for one, if I'm if I'm the owner of one of these Roadsters, I am not even allowing that service plug to be plugged in until both the battery and the power electronics module have been at least looked at, because the last thing in the world I would want would be to turn the key and hear a pop and begin to smell electrical burning. That might be what happens. We don't know.
Yeah, it'll be a very carefully orchestrated reverse engineering process when those cars get here.
Yeah, most definitely.
But the other thing that I find is the people that are bidding on these, I think they misunderstand the value and what these cars should be used for. We have people that want to buy these to drive them.
Right.
Well, the value in the car is going to be its low mileage. And if you look at history and its brief comp value, Tesla Roadster history, the low mileage cars are worth double what the rest of the Roadsters are. There was one that was 1,300 miles. It's in our service center being stored. That sold for over $200,000. There's one at 894 miles that sold for $295,000. It happened to be low VIN and low mileage combination.
Right.
So these are not going to go cheap. And if you do buy one and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on it, I'm not sure you want to unravel its value by putting it into daily driving mode.
Well, one of the articles that was published really brought that to light well. These VIN numbers are middle of the road VIN numbers. They're in the 1,050 to 1,200 range. Nothing special about the VIN numbers. Nothing special about really anything on the car except the fact that it's a brand new car still.
Right.
And so if you turn the car from a brand new car into a driven car, a low mileage car, if you spent $200,000 on it and drive it 300 miles, you really truly might be paying $1,000 a mile in depreciation.
Sure. Our 1,300 mile Roadster, the collector, was very specific. I don't want this car test driven. When I get it back after the upgrades and the deferred maintenance, I'm going to drive it around the block 4 times a year just to keep the bushings lubricated, and that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to preserve that low mileage.
And there's depending on who buys it, I could potentially see somebody buy it and say, no, I don't want the deferred maintenance done because I'm never even going to turn on the car.
Good point. Yes. So if the batteries truly are bricked, hard bricked, where they're not repairable, and the PEM has deferred maintenance, what difference does it make if it's just simply going to sit there and never be driven? All that deferred maintenance and that dead battery are just buried inside the car.
Absolutely. We even sold a car through our matchmaking service to a museum, and it was bricked. And they, as we talked to them, they began to realize this would be the perfect car for us because we can get it for less than market value for a working car, and we don't have to do any of the repairs. It's going to sit in a museum.
The funny part about that conversation was when he asked, and this is a museum owner, by the way, in Columbus, Ohio, who's starting an EV museum. And he said, all of these Roadsters you have out here, they're $100,000 to $120,000, but here's one for $70,000. That's more in my price range. So why is it $70K? And I said, well, it's brick. That means it doesn't drive. He said, I don't want a car that doesn't drive. I said, well, what are you going to do with it? And in that conversation, the car got sold. Like you said, it's a perfect fit.
Yeah.
It just sits there and looks pretty.
Real quick, I'm going to pull up. I underestimated the Twitter. There's actually 4.7 million.
4.7 million views on that. That explains why we're getting so much traffic and interest in these cars.
By all means.
At least one of them. So staying with this for a moment. I have some very specific preferences for these 3 cars. Should they be split up was a question. I don't think so. I mean, when you adopt children, you don't separate brother and sister,
right.
These cars are from a particular era. They all have the same conditions, 0 miles, and they really should be treated with respect and as part of history and preserved and kept together, in my opinion. So if they are collector-owned, again, we talked about this. Should new batteries be installed and the upgrades done to resolve deferred maintenance? it's not necessary. This is going to become a collectible in someone's collection, which leads me to the next point. I would hate to see these go to a collector that has a 30-car garage somewhere, and it's going to be an obscure bit of art in that center. As someone pointed out on Twitter, actually, Elon should buy these. He should make room at the main Tesla plant in Fremont in the front lobby and show these cars as an early part of their history. And the reason I agree with that is when the Roadster that traveled around the world, which is also in our service center right now, which is going to go back soon, after it went around the world, a museum in Munich, Germany asked if they could display that car. He said, sure, fine, I'll give it to you for a year. It turns out hundreds of thousands of people came to see that car. Roadsters are hot,
Right.
Especially something with a pedigree that's gone around the world or whatever. So that's what prompted him to give it to them for another 6 months, and what eventually ended up breaking the car, because the first team for the first year knew how to charge it. The second team did not, and it got bricked, and that's why it's in our service center getting the battery replaced. So, again, these are very special cars. I would like to see them go to to Tesla.
Sure.
That would be my first choice.
Sure.
And if they're going to break them up, okay. But let's make these cars available to the public. Museums. The Peterson would be an ideal place to park one of these cars. I don't know if they have a budget for 3 of these, and we don't yet know what they'll sell for, because this is the other question I'm asked all the time. What do you think they're worth? I have no idea, because in the world of real estate, it's very simple. If you need a comp value for your house, you simply look at what your neighbor's house was bought for 5 months ago.
Right.
And that gives you your comp value. If you don't have any sales with pedigrees like this, it's very difficult to establish a value. And sometimes what happens is you get 2 rich people that are at auction that are bidding against each other, and the price goes into places you had never anticipated. So it's very difficult to put a price on these. They're probably, I think priceless is the right word, right?
I think it is as well. The only way I could ever see a potential comp value is if these 3 are broken up. If one person decides, oh, I have to have, the red one, or I have to have the orange Sport, and they pay an amount that satisfies the seller, and then he sells just that one. Okay, now they've established the market for the other 2 by what they sold the first one for.
Or another way these things could lose value, they find a few more shipping containers full of cars. You never know.
What are the odds of that? We actually asked that. Are we done after the sale? Will anything like this ever happen again? And it's remotely possible, but I think highly improbable.
Well, and that's where our census program comes to our aid here. While we know that we don't have 100% of all Roadsters on the census program, we also know that we have, close to 2,000 Roadsters listed. And if there's only 2,500 that have ever been made, that's already at least 80%. So the chances of finding another brand new Roadster like that are going to be pretty low, because we have a pretty good idea worldwide of where these Roadsters are.
And of course, there were a number lost over the years, either collision or fire or parts purchases by Tesla.
Yes.
So, that 2,000 is probably generous. There are some duplications in there. But I'm really proud of the Roadster community, by the way, updating us continuously on where the Roadsters are, whether they're running or not, what the VINs are, and all of that. And what it's doing is making the census much more accurate as time goes by.
By all means.
Mark, we got a lot of questions.
Okay, well, let's get started. Let's see. To start, watch Rich Rebuild's channel. Hey, guys. Welcome back, and glad to have you watching us today. And then on TikTok, Canada 2022. Have you tried to get a contract with Tesla to do warranty repairs?
We have not tried to do that, although another EV manufacturer has reached out to us. What we're going to find, I believe, is that the EV manufacturers that are having difficulty scaling their service delivery are going to look to companies like us to outsource their warranty work to, or at least augment it. Tesla doesn't seem to have that problem. They're able to create service delivery at the pace that they have to keep pace with their production goals. But I'm not ruling it out. For example, Tesla already subcontracts out their body and paint
Right.
to collision shops. We have applied for that a couple, 3 times, and it always gets back to, well, are you willing to do some body work and weld some aluminum and spray paint and sand panels and all that? And we typically say, we can do it, but it's not our preference. We are electronics people. We repair the rest of the car.
Right. Right.
So at this point, the answer is no, it's not happening, but I'm not going to rule it out.
Well, and I mean, all we have to do is look at the waiting list that we have for people with Model S's that want to have electronics repairs done and things like that. And we're beginning to work through some of that backlog. We have a wonderfully talented young man that's come in and has worked with Tesla in the past, is now working with us. Mike Severn on TikTok, amazing idea and facility, he says.
It is. I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
TikTok, Strong Dynamics 2. He says, we're still up for a franchise whenever you're ready, big dog.
That'd be
just
awesome.
quickly, we just don't have the bandwidth at this point to scale. And finding people to do the work is extremely difficult. We've had offers to have people fly in from Australia, Eastern Europe for training. We can't keep up with our customer cars, with the Model S's, for example. We give Roadsters priority, and those get in and out fairly quickly, but the rest of the cars, if we had more bandwidth, we would be doing all of that.
Definitely. Strong Dynamics 2 also says, so this car was pre-Elon era? Question.
No, actually, Elon came in 2004, I believe, and these were sold in 2010. It was after Martin Eberhard had already left, and just before the Tesla Model S was released in 2012. But in 2010, everything was still very much Tesla Roadster. That's what you saw at the factories and at the service centers.
Yeah, pretty much that was it for then. Lightning Rod has joined us back again on YouTube. Hello from Thunder Bay, friends. Cold and no sun yet. Lightning Rod, I don't know if I'll make you jealous or not, but we just had our first 100-degree day here in Phoenix this week. I would love to trade 20 degrees with you. You can warm up a little and we can go back to nice temperatures.
YouTube, Trucker is joining us. Trucker Alistair, how are you? He says, good to see you guys again, but doesn't it make sense to remove the batteries for use in other Roadsters? Hence the museum only to admire and not to drive. When Tesla replaces the battery packs in the Roadster, they do use the old case or chassis, and it is a one-to-one. There is no shortage at this point. They had some extras when they started, and I suppose that might become important if they begin to run out of cases. The cases, by the way, for the Tesla Roadster were made by a barbecue manufacturer in Thailand. I can never leave that out because I just think that's so indicative of the time period and the supply chain problems that Tesla had back in the day.
Well, I guess that goes to your comment earlier today about the C grade vendors. Your A grade vendors would never touch this, and even the B grade vendors were not necessarily interested.
They weren't that keen in all cases. True.
Kyle Joseph on TikTok says, good evening. Welcome, Kyle. He has a question. Do you guys get reimbursed in any way from Tesla for the great works that you guys do? Or is it that you guys work totally independent of Tesla?
Well, the customers, they reimburse us for the work that we do. And we don't do warranty work because we don't get reimbursed by Tesla for warranty work. And the things we work on typically are out of warranty. So that kind of answers it. I think the Roadsters have been out of warranty for years, the Tesla Model S's for about 3 years, and the other later platform car or Teslas are going to come off warranty. And that's typically when they start coming to our service center because the work is no longer free. They can't just take it to a Tesla service center and get that battery replaced or that drivetrain.
Right. I mean, we're trying to gear up for the Model 3s coming off of warranty now in about 1.5 years, I think, is when they start. And, I mean, that is when the floodgates will open.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
But the final part...
Sorry, real quick. We're at 55 minutes, just letting you know.
Okay. But the final part of that question, do you guys work totally independent of Tesla? And there I'm proud to say no. We have learned how to partner with them. We collaborate with them. We share technical information. They use us as a vendor for parts. We even make parts for the Roadster for them. And it has turned into a wonderful partnership, and it's consistent with our business philosophy and culture that there is no such thing as a total competitor. No competitive overlap is ever 100%. And what you do is a smart businessman or person will capitalize on the areas of synergy. You can turn a competitor into a customer and into a vendor. And that's exactly what we've done with Tesla.
Yeah, they've been great partners to work with over these times. Pablo Damon, when talking about the lugs on YouTube, says 5 lugs, every other one. That's exactly right, Pablo. And then Ron DiGiacomo on YouTube says, great information. I have number 18, a British Racing Green Roadster. It has less than 5,000 miles, and I'm interested in getting in line for a battery upgrade.
Outstanding. Let us know where you are, Don. We have a queue program on the Roadster census site, actually. And if you go to the website, there's a button you can click how to get into the battery queue. We'll then send you instructions, 2 different places that you can register your request or do your order processing for that battery. We share our list with Tesla every month or 2, and we'll give you a direct link as well on how to notify them. And there's the website, yes. And in one of those, it will say, join the 3.0 battery upgrade. There you go. VIN number 18, congratulations. You've got either a Euro version, Signature 250, or a Signature 100 US version. It's quite an accomplishment. Were you going to talk about the...
I am going to talk about, and this is the perfect segue. We've talked for a number of weeks about merchandise and things that we want to sell, and a lot of questions about sunglasses.
But we didn't get any today.
I'm
disappointed.
surprised. Yeah. One of the things that we do, that we're doing, though, we're going to start selling our sunglass cases. These are, made with full grain leather. They've got the Gerber Motor Company engraved on the back, and then on the front, you've got Signature Series plus a serial number, or you're holding one of the Founders Series ones.
This is Signature number 5, actually.
That one's the Signature
Founder Series. Yes,
that
you're
one's
right.
Founder Series number 5. I'm holding right now Signature Series number 2. Like the Roadsters, we will only make a maximum of 100 of these Signature Series sunglass cases. If you are interested in one of these, inquire. And the guys out over here said we got to put sunglasses in the case, so not taking these off. But we do have sunglasses, a nice pair of aviators go right into the case.
Thing, real quick, guys, is it's kind of hard to see without going and refocusing the camera what they actually look like up close. So we will get images up on our website and on our social media in the next day or so.
Very good.
So look forward. I'm glad to see that we finally started to have these come in. Founder Series are going to be reserved for the people that basically we decide to send them to or to give them to. The Signature Series, like I say, the first 100 will be for the people who want to buy them. After that, we'll continue to make them, but they just won't have the Signature Series on the top.
So email us at ev@gruber.com if there's interest, and keep an eye on the website, because according to our webmaster, we're going to have that swag out there pretty soon for you to be able to review and get better pictures and buy. One final thing that I wanted to leave everybody with is on that census program, by the way, we started a list of celebrity-owned Roadsters. And again, this is a collaborative effort. We need you guys to give us some feedback as well.
Yes.
The ones that we weren't sure about was, what VIN number did Arnold Schwarzenegger have? And I forget what the other one was that we weren't sure of.
So I just put that up.
You did. There you go. What's the question mark there?
So we have famous Roadster owners listed up there. The text is a little bit small for me to read.
Much better.
There we go. Robin Williams with VIN 6, or Elon Musk with VIN 2, Martin Eberhardt, VIN 1. We know that Arnold Schwarzenegger owned or owns, I don't know which, a Roadster, but we don't know what VIN number it was.
Now, Leonardo DiCaprio, that's another one that we weren't sure of. And if you know of any other celebrities that had Tesla Roadsters, and they don't, it's not necessary for them to still own it. We're just looking for anybody that owned a Roadster at one point in time. And oftentimes these things migrate into private ownership, non-celebrity ownership. And, the owners are proud of the fact that they had Matt Damon's car, for example. That was in our shop for a while.
Yes.
And as always, I keep talking about VIN number 6. I passed that up at auction 5 years ago in Shirley, Massachusetts. It bid up to $17,000, and I've decided Shirley is too hard to get a car out of because we ended up with 3 months worth of storage charge on a Model S, and I stopped at 17 and somebody snagged it. So whoever has it, you have a very special car. It turns out that Robin actually bought that for his wife, Marcia.
Oh,
and
okay.
that's the name on the carbon fiber plaque. It was bricked at the time. That's why it was $17,000.
Okay.
And we'd certainly like to see if that car is back on the road and back in play and someone's enjoying it.
Oh, we certainly hope that it is. We're going to be moving the time for this podcast. What we have found is that there are a lot of you in the audience and friends in the audience are coming and listening to us late in the evening in Europe. We love the fact that you're able to do that, but we also know that it's going to be somewhere between 11 o'clock in the evening and 1 o'clock in the morning when our podcast starts. So starting next week, right, Pete?
Next week, yes.
Yeah, starting next week, we're going to move the Roadster Roundtable podcast to the 10 o'clock a.m. Mountain Standard Time time slot that we have for our other 2 podcasts on Tuesday and Thursday. That will be the time going forward. And so I wanted to make sure that you guys all know about that. We'll go ahead and send out some announcements too.
Yeah, we'll send out some announcements. That's the same as Pacific time right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right.
PST,
Yeah.
MST.
Arizona doesn't do the time zone change that the rest of the U.S. does. So we always talk about Mountain Standard Time, whether it's in the fall or in the spring. Right now we're on California time. Come November, we will be on Denver time.
Tomorrow, we have a special guest from Germany, Conrad Buck, who was supposed to join us actually a week and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
And because of time zone differences, which prompted us to change these times, he's going to be joining us for what's normally the broader EV podcast, which isn't too inappropriate because Conrad actually does work on things more than Roadster. He works on other EVs, especially Teslas. So we're going to get a chance to meet him, and you'll be able to ask questions. What kind of reach does he have in Europe? How long has he been doing this? What are his skills? And they're always informative. So join us tomorrow at 10 o'clock, 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, and Conrad will be our guest tomorrow.
And I look forward to, I think we might be getting a virtual tour of his facility as well.
That's right. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, he's going to be on a Zoom call. And I believe he's going to take us around and show us his shop.
I certainly hope so. I think that's going to be great. So thank you guys so much for coming this afternoon. And we look forward to talking to you tomorrow and next week.
Thank you.